Welcome to our podcast, View from the Helm, Profiles of Leadership in the Maritime and Subsea Sectors. View from the Helm is produced by New Wave Media, a New York City-based B2B media company that publishes several global leading brands, including Maritime Reporter and Engineering News, Marine News, and Marine Technology Reporter. For more information, visit newwavemedia.com.
Hello, and welcome to View from the Helm, exploring maritime and subsea leadership, brought to you by New Wave Media. New Wave Media is one of the world's premier B2B publishers in the maritime, offshore energy, and subsea ports and logistics spaces. Visit newwavemedia.com for more information and for more content. My name is Laurel, and I'm a contributing writer for New Wave Media's Marine Technology Reporter magazine. I'll be your host for today's podcast, where we're going to be chatting about industry experience, leadership advice, and life with ocean tech expert and retired Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet. He's definitely a veteran when it comes to all things maritime. I've been lucky enough to have him as a mentor for a couple of years, but I've been even more lucky to have him as something else for far longer. He's also my dad. So, Dad, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, Laurel, it's great to be here, and thank you. Yes, so I'm a retired Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet. I'm currently an ocean technology consultant, and I work with a number of companies that are profiled in Marine Technology Reporter. Previously, I was the acting and deputy administrator of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and before that, served for 32 years in the Navy, reaching a point in the Pentagon as the Oceanographer of the Navy.
Yeah, I know you have quite a long and awesome career in many different realms, which I am so appreciative that I have you as a role model to look up to.
Oh, you're sweet.
Many of the reasons that I'm excited to get to have you on this podcast, where we can kind of talk about how you made your way into the industry, what your career looked like.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, your journey kind of really started in the Navy, where you kind of began to make your way into the maritime industries. Would you mind sharing kind of how you made your way through that?
Yeah. Thanks, Laurel. So I went to the Naval Academy, and that's how I was commissioned to become an oceanography officer in the U.S. Navy. And what was great about that career path in the Navy is you get exposed to ocean technologies from the very beginning. I mean, even at the Naval Academy, we were using side-scan sonar to do surveys and collect data in the Chesapeake Bay, which is right behind us. And in fact, the Naval Academy is just up the way that way, up north. And then so my first tour, for example, was going to graduate school at Scripps, where I work with multi-beam sonar and satellite imagery. I went on a few cruises on a couple Scripps ships, and then I immediately deployed to the Arabian Gulf and worked on a hydrographic survey ship, again towing side-scan sonar and operating multi-beam sonar and using other types of collection equipment like conductivity, temperature, and depth profilers, and things like that. So it's just neat. And then throughout my Navy career, which we can get into, I've been able to see the advance of those technologies, moving more into uncrewed systems, for example, and others.
It's pretty incredible how you've gotten to see like all these things come to be and evolve throughout your career, starting in the Navy.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about uncrewed systems, autonomous systems, drones. That's probably where I've seen the biggest advances, and I'm excited about that. In fact, Marine Technology Reporter profiled me, I think in 2020. I made the cover, how about that? And you've seen it. But it was neat because that's what I was doing at NOAA. I was advancing uncrewed systems because I'd seen that in the Navy. And I think you might not know my whole journey, but I started with those systems in San Diego, where you were born. And that was when I was working with the Navy SEALs. And we were standing up their first organic drone programs, aerial drones, underwater drones, and for both environmental collection, which mattered to them. For example, the patrols they were doing on the rivers in Iraq, the Tigris and Euphrates, they didn't have any knowledge of the bathymetry, and some of the boats were running aground. So we were using drones to collect that data. And then I moved on to the Naval Oceanographic Office, and then commanded the Naval Meteorology and Oceanography Command, which at the time was using more drones than any, and still is actually, outfit in the Navy. Currently they have over 120 of the ocean gliders. They operate about half a dozen of the Remus 6000s. These are the deep diving autonomous underwater vehicles that go 6,000 meters, which is most of the ocean. And that was a real thrill. The Naval Oceanographic Office has just been a pioneer and leader. And so I got to work with them for a while with those autonomous systems.
That's pretty incredible. I feel like all these remote technologies that we're developing, and not just we, but like the maritime tech, subsea tech industries, communities. It's something that I never really thought about before you started really talking to me about stuff like that from Navy and from your time at NOAA as well. And I think it's super interesting, super cool technologies.
Robots, ocean robots.
Yeah.
And in fact, Laurel, we just wrote an article on the ocean robot revolution. The last episode, was it the November, December issue of MTR?
The December, E edition.
Check that one out, the electronic edition. It's great. And there, you profiled a number of companies that are on the leading edge of ocean autonomy. And and that's what's so neat about the capability. What we're seeing now in the marine industry, to me, is the equivalent of what SpaceX is doing for NASA. And that's what we have. We have these companies that are just making great advances and doing things and reaching depths and monitoring the ocean or conducting applications for the ocean, whether it be search and survey or things like that, but with now autonomy. And in deep areas that before, most of the ocean's not even been monitored. About 90% of the ocean volume has never even been explored, and we're starting to get over that. And about 75% of the seafloor of the world has never been mapped to modern standards, which is, we know more about Mars, the surface of Mars and the moon, than we do our own ocean floor.
That's so crazy.
And this technology is helping us get over that and address that gap, that knowledge gap.
I feel like that remote and autonomous technology is something that I've always heard you talk about throughout all the parts of your career, from Navy to NOAA to even now, currently, where you've been consulting. I help a little bit. I try my best as the daughter.
You're my chief marketing officer,
He's
and you
my
do a great
boss.
job. That's right. I hope I'm a good boss.
No, he's a great boss.
Thank you.
But I just...
Because I pay well.
Yes, you do. And you're a fun one.
Oh, there you go.
I'm lucky.
We're
Lucky
both
in a
lucky.
lot of different ways.
But yeah, you saying though that it's neat because when I was a naval oceanographer, that we relied on autonomous systems and a wide range of ocean technology. For example, multi-beam sonar I mentioned, and deployed autonomous fixed systems and that were classified, mostly acoustic. And then now when I went to NOAA, I tried to translate some of that there because I saw this great ocean agency, which is charged with mapping and monitoring the U.S. exclusive economic zone, and they, a lot of that work they were doing was sort of stovepiped or fractured, and so what I did is I got the agency together, different offices, and I developed these strategies and strategic plans. One was on uncrewed systems or drones. One was on artificial intelligence, which is the application of autonomy and machine learning. And a couple other ones, one purely on data, because when you have autonomous systems, you're getting an explosion of data. And then if you want to do something good with the data, like applying artificial intelligence algorithms, you need a lot of it and you need to handle it. So we had a separate strategy just on data.
Yeah.
But you're right, now I've been able to leave NOAA and consult with a number of the companies that were working with my old employers, Navy and NOAA. So that's been neat.
Connections.
Yeah.
I will say, to touch on leadership a little bit as well, one of the coolest things as your daughter was we would get letters to the door, and I would see, I have 2 younger sisters, he has 2 younger daughters, and we would just scroll on formerly Twitter, currently X, and just be like, we know he's a big name now, he's up in the government, people might be talking about him, right? So we'd search his name up, a little nervous because the internet can be scary place,
true.
and we would just see nothing but the people who took to Twitter and mentioned your name were always people saying, I really appreciate Admiral G and everything he does for NOAA. Oh, I think he's really great, that he really values everyone. And then you would always tell us, the things that you thought were important when it came to leadership. And I think that's such an important piece, other than all the scientific parts, other than the technological advancements. The leadership that you exhibited and even what we saw from it was really important, and I think is a great thing for all of me and the girls.
That's sweet, honey. I appreciate that. Well, it's good that you bring that up. I think people get focused on technology, and I think wherever you go, and it's neat because this applies to you when you were at school getting your graduate degree, you currently are still, and on your swim team, and in any business, especially if you're in a business and it's a technology business, if leaders don't think about all the helpful ways to lead the entire organization, the positive ways, some people get left out. And for example, I think it's important to acknowledge what one employee at NOAA called the little people. She was a conference organizer like you do, and at every conference I'd see her, and I always made a point to get a picture with her and thank her because she was the one like setting up the booth, and NOAA had a pretty huge booth at these conferences. I mean, it was the size of a city block. So she did a lot of hard work, and I always made a point to thank her, and she sent me a message like the one you've seen before on social media and just said, hey, thanks for recognizing the little people. And I told her there are no little people in any organization. Everyone matters and has value. And I think that's just the onus on a leader is to make sure people feel that way.
Yeah, I think that's one of my biggest takeaways when it comes to, even though I'm certainly in no position of leadership right now, but it's good to
Not true. This is what I tell everybody is, especially the junior people. I had so many junior sailors when I was an admiral and captain and commander before that set an example for me, that did something or showed some kind of selflessness that I thought then they set a standard. They raised the bar, and I tried to meet that. This happens all the time. So I just want you to know, you and every word you say and thing you write and act you do have a chance to show a positive example and lead that way. So you're doing it right now.
Thanks, Dad. It's good to know. But really, it's just, I want you to know, and I want everyone to know that he's a great role model.
Oh, thanks.
Good guy. But yeah, I don't know if we actually mentioned exactly what you did for NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Yeah, well, I was the acting administrator, so I was in charge for a while, and my permanent position was the deputy, which in any organization is really the number two, and so I was always leading at some significant level. But I kind of had free reign, so we decided to pick some priorities. I mean, when you're in charge, you set the priorities, and so one of the things that we made it a priority, which continues, which is great after I left, is we called it our blue economy priority. And it was advancing ocean data and collection systems for the benefit of the American blue economy. So things like fisheries management and the $200 billion economic impact that has in the U.S., or marine transportation in U.S. ports, which rely on ocean data and weather data. I mean, our U.S. seaports are amazing. They bring in and see $5.4 or so trillion of economic activity, which is a whole quarter of U.S. GDP. And they all depend that safe and effective flow of commerce through our ports. It relies on ocean information like nautical charts, ocean current information, real-time current information, weather forecasts. And then you have a really exciting one for you and me, and that's coastal tourism and recreation. So scuba diving like we like to do, beach going like we like to do. And all of those, you take all the U.S. counties in the country, and if you were to put them all together and make them a country, that country would have the third largest GDP in the world. So this is our coastal economy's giant, and to keep that thriving and people safe as they enjoy the oceans and coasts and Great Lakes, weather data, ocean data, and it is important. So that was NOAA's big focus area for me, was advancing the services and data we provided that helped to power America's blue economy.
That's pretty amazing. I really do think that, considering how important the blue economy, NOAA, is to not just like the U.S. overall, but I feel like economic status is something that is really valued. Not status, but you know what I mean. Like, our economy is seen as very important by the majority of the American people. And the amount of people who don't even know what NOAA is or what NOAA does, when you consider how important everything that you guys did and everything that NOAA did and does and has done, it just is pretty insane to me. Like, I don't understand how so few people, like, when I go down and I would tell people, oh, my dad works for NOAA, most of the like looks I would get were just blank stares.
What's that?
Who? Who's NOAA?
Yeah,
Am I supposed to know that?
I used to gripe about all the press NASA gets, where, which is rightfully so. NASA's doing great things, going back to the moon, but But when you look at what this agency, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, does, NOAA affects every American life every day, whether it's a weather forecast or, again, fisheries science for our coastal economies, or just the monitoring of our tides and currents along the coast, and just in the interior, it's weather forecast for everybody in the country. Which there are times in the winter where every county in the U.S. nearly is under a weather advisory. We're here right now. We had a winter weather advisory here, and so that's keeping people safe and saving lives and protecting property. So I had I don't talk about this much, but one of my jobs in the Navy when I was relatively young was I was a weather forecaster in Spain, and a weather forecaster on 2 ships, an aircraft carrier and an amphibious assault ship. And so I really understood that mission of NOAA and identified with it, and I really like to promote that. And so that was my kind of running PR pitch, is to get NOAA on the same level of NASA. And in fact, one of my favorite articles that I was quoted in, I talked about that fact, how I worked in 2 locations, NOAA headquarters in Silver Spring, Maryland, and then the Department of Commerce building in downtown D.C. And whenever I was there, I'd go running on the mall at lunchtime every time, and I'd always see kids with NASA shirts, and it annoyed me because I wanted to see kids with NOAA shirts. And I said that during a public meeting once, and the headline was, NOAA Deputy Administrator, I want to see a kid with a NOAA shirt. But it was a great article because it was on our big initiative to map the U.S. EEZ. At the time, America's oceans had only been mapped about 40% of coverage. And so we launched a national initiative to map our U.S. EEZ using autonomous systems and ships and partnerships. And now they're underway, still going through with that plan. And we've mapped over 50% now. So we've really made a dent in that.
That's a huge
improvement. It's for the positive reasons I mentioned. Improving safety of navigation and marine shipping, and providing us important information, help manage fisheries, and all these other aspects of the blue economy.
Yeah, that's super important. And I agree with all those initiatives I mentioned earlier. Currently, and like you just said, you're consulting. You have a consulting business, Ocean Science, Technology, and Leadership.
Right on. Good. Yes, thank you.
I hope I know.
I trained you well.
Yeah, I try. But would you tell us a little bit about what you're really doing with that business, who you're working with, what your goals are?
Yeah. It wasn't too hard for me to move into that because I had worked with all these great companies when I was with the Navy and NOAA that are doing subsea technology applications. And it kind of naturally just evolved where I didn't want to build a big company, and I didn't want to join necessarily one and have that be my only thing. So I just ended up having discussions with some of my former partners, and I ended up now working with them and helping them either secure or continue work that they are doing with the Navy and NOAA and some other partners in the U.S. government. Just having been 36 years in the U.S. government, I knew a little bit about it, and that's what these companies were doing. And I'll talk about a few of them because they're doing some great things. The first one was a company formerly called XBlue, now XAL, and what they were keenly interested in is they built a surface drone called the Drix, and what's great about it is it's designed primarily for hydrography, mapping the seafloor, which requires an ultra-stable platform. So it has a wave-piercing bow. It's designed to collect the best order bathymetry in high sea states like sea state 4 or 5. And it does that, which is really remarkable. And so while I was with NOAA, they were working with the Office of Coast Survey because we wanted to, one of my initiatives was a big unmanned systems or uncrewed systems strategy. And as part of that, we were trying to replace crewed survey boats with these drones. And they had just done some sort of prototyping at the time. And after I left, they wanted to really get into selling more of them. And NOAA was really into it. And so they put out a request for information because they were considering, due to a lot of the work I initiated, to replace all the crewed survey boats, they call them survey launches, hydrographic survey launches, on their ships with these drones and the Drix. And they're underway doing that now. They've acquired 3. And they're using them. They've already used them for hydrographic surveys, mapping the seafloor, and fishery surveys, measuring with acoustics the abundance and biomass, basically, of fishery stocks, so you can help manage them. And now they're moving forward to replace all these HSLs with the Drixes, which is making them the very first federal ships that'll be designed to be motherships of drones.
Oh wow!
Which is cool. I mean,
That's
that
really
is
cool.
that is absolutely the future.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get the Navy to follow this lead. My old organization, the Navy Meteorology and Oceanography Command. But NOAA's leading in that capacity, and this company Exhale is helping them get there. So that's been one. A couple others. Another drone company is called Alcimar, and they build this really amazing glider. Now, a glider is an unmanned underwater vehicle that has a typically long duration, and what they do is they go out over a month, possibly several, and they go slowly, and they call it their buoyancy driven. So they change their buoyancy, and they have fins on them to allow. So whenever they go up and down the water column and change their buoyancy, it allows for a forward motion. And so they profile the water column. But these are so good because they're the best on the market with their acoustic technology. So they can monitor passively the acoustic conditions, and that allows them to understand ambient noise, for example, which the Navy cares about in sonar operations.
Certainly.
As well as things like marine mammals, which NOAA cares about. So that's another company I'm working with. They're great. Their glider is really capable, and those are two examples. There's other things I'm involved with. In terms of space technology, there's a great weather company that I'm working with that is building a low Earth orbit constellation of weather satellites.
Wow.
And this is powerful because every mariner at sea depends on a good weather forecast. And one of the most important parameters to predict is precipitation, because in the coast that causes flooding and usually the biggest cause of death. So they're building this constellation of weather radar satellites that's going to help us better predict precipitation. And I'll do one more company which I like a lot, and I've stayed with for a while, and that's So Far Ocean. And they're neat because they have a global network of ocean data buoys, and they're measuring primarily wave spectra or sea state. And that's really, and they work with all the major shipping lines because knowing the sea state allows them to optimally route the ships for fuel efficiency and safety, and so they're doing that, and now they're working to add other sensors on their buoys. So they have a global network of 1,000 or more buoys, and now they're going to put on things like hydrophones. The Navy's interested to maybe work in the Western Pacific to track adversary China assets. So there's a lot going on in this space, and I'm having far from retirement, having a great time, as you know.
Yeah, that's really like a huge wealth of information networks, like all that data. I feel like a lot of what you mentioned is collection of data, maintenance of data. But across so many different spheres for so many different reasons. I just think that's super cool.
Well,
and I'm glad that I have you to kind of help me learn this and navigate this, all the different ways that all these companies and entities use data, collect it, and the technologies that are used to gather it.
It's exciting. It is because we know so little about the ocean still, but as you see, we're fielding the systems to address that gap in knowledge, and as well as all that infrastructure, data infrastructure, to do something with it. And then add to that with all this data. Well, then we really can leverage the full power of it by these advances in artificial intelligence, which is exciting because these data-driven ways to take that and derive knowledge. You might have seen, for example, ChatGPT. Well, that's a large language model, they call it, where you can basically look for patterns in data language, basically written word, and use that to develop autonomously information, writing essays that college kids should not be using this program for, but the like. And what's neat about it, though, is that it's evolving so fast, we almost don't know what it's going to be like in the future. But I think it's exciting.
Yeah.
Because it's only benefiting us. Quick sea story for me. So there's all this talk. AI is a buzzword. It's advancing rapidly, and for good, I think. But I did a machine learning thesis at Scripps in
That's awesome.
1990. So it's not old.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not new. Pardon me. It's just that now we have computational power that you can do it on a device, and that's where the revolution's occurring.
I'll use the fact that you brought up ChatGPT and your degree at Scripps to mention the fact that I've always found it funny, and I feel like a lot of people find it interesting when we bring this up, the fact that you are more of you came from science, you came from oceanography and the ocean, and kind of worked your way towards communications and writing and stuff like this. But for me, it was the opposite. I kind of found my base in communications and writing, and have been finding my way towards including the ocean and including maritime tech and all that kind of science with communications and using communications for that. But I'm just glad that we've been able to both, come together and help each other on those different ends, I feel like.
Yeah, no, I love this, Laurel. It's we complement each other in this way because this was your major at school and at Nova Southeastern Communications, and then your graduate degree's in the same, and then you've woven marine technology into it in a great way that New Wave Media does so well. And for me, my first passion was the ocean and the technology to study it and learn from it. But once I got into higher levels of leadership, your job is to communicate, and it's a learning process. But over time, especially when I got to be like the commander level and had commanding officer jobs. My first commanding officer job was with a group that worked with the Navy SEALs. Then you really have to be up there and lead and motivate and inspire, and that's all about communicating. And after a while, when you get the feedback is such that when your sailors really respond, or your people, it's very rewarding. And in fact, there's nothing more rewarding, really. It's rewarding to learn something new and to make revenue or whatever that is.
Absolutely.
But when you really uplift somebody and inspire them to go down a path in a good way, that's really what it's all about. And so that communication part of leadership is something I've just had a lot of fun with.
Yeah, that's honestly good because you've showed me a lot of how to incorporate the two things. And I mean, even though my majors were in communication and composition, I'm still learning about that, certainly.
We're all learning, and that's the great thing about life. It's learning is a lifelong process, and just embrace that and know that there's always something more you can do and learn and become better at.
Oh, for sure. I know I said that I didn't primarily find an interest in ocean, but that's definitely not what I meant. Scholar-wise, I started with writing and communication and composition, but I've always loved the ocean. I've always been interested in it, and I definitely have you and Mom to thank for that. Well,
exactly, and thanks to us, I guess Laurel really couldn't help it because when her mother and father are Scripps Oceanographic Institution graduates, you really don't have a choice but to do ocean stuff for vacations, and that's what we've done. No, we've done beach vacations ever since I remember taking you to Hawaii when you weren't even 1 year old. That was when I was still on the Kitty Hawk, and I took some leave with Mom to see her. But and we've been doing that ever since, and it's great. We're scuba divers, and of course, thanks to
Mom for sure.
Karen's mother, or Laurel's mother, Karen, was also a Naval Academy graduate like me, an oceanography major, but she was unique, and she became a Navy salvage diving officer, and that's why we like to dive so much now.
Mm-hmm. I gotta say, when I tell people that both my parents went to the Naval Academy, it's always like, wow, really? And then I tell them not only that, but my mom went to dive school, then they're really like,
that blows me away. Navy diver, that's yes. And so it's and here we are. We this last about a couple of years ago, my crazy wife dragged me to Guadalupe Island where we went cage diving with white sharks. But what was neat about that is that it wasn't sort of a Discovery Channel Shark Fest thing. It was actually for Nat Geo, and it was a legitimate science project with a nonprofit that I got to know from my time at NOAA.
That's so cool.
And they've been doing a 20-year time series of collecting data on individuals, and by the pattern of dark and light that runs along the side of these fish, these large fish, you can identify individuals. And so we went and basically photo ID'd and found 37 new sharks that year alone. So it was fun to participate in some citizen science like that. And then
That's
since
amazing.
then, shoot, you and me, we've been free diving in Florida.
All the time.
You-
Jupiter,
That's
off
right.
the coast of Jupiter is amazing. We've
With,
been able to free dive with lemons and bull sharks,
lemon sharks
too,
and bull
which
sharks.
was
That's
an amazing experience.
if we're going to talk about subsea, that's it. That is the experience
awesome.
to do a couple times with you. And then, shoot, we were in Bimini for Caribbean reef sharks. That was a lot of fun, sitting on the bottom there.
That was amazing.
Yes.
That was super beautiful, beautiful water there.
Yeah. Oh, that was great.
And beautiful animals, like those sharks, the fish, the species, the corals there were huge.
Oh, gosh. Well, yeah. And we'll have to get you to the NOAA Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary in the Gulf of Mexico, where Mom and me just went diving. And that is as damaged and unhealthy a lot of the reefs are in the world. The flower gardens are in great shape. They're still pristine, thankfully. But hey, what's neat, so we're going to keep having fun, of course, but what I'm really thrilled about, especially to have you here now, is that professionally we've been able to sync up because, shoot, as I'm on the editorial board of Marine Technology Reporter, now you're a contributor, and here you are. This is your second piece, this podcast,
Super
and we're looking for more.
Very grateful for these opportunities and super excited to be combining these two worlds. I feel like all throughout my undergraduate experience, I was always worried because I was like, if I don't get a degree in marine biology or oceanography, how am I going to be able to practice it? How am I going to be able to stay involved in those worlds? I had no idea that I could still manage to bring together communications and writing and the marine world. So
I have a good story for you on this one. You may have heard this, but so in that theme of trying to find your path, a very famous Navy admiral named Bill McRaven, 4-star admiral, Navy SEAL, was in charge of the raid that killed Osama bin Laden. A good friend of mine. And I met him for the first time when I was just a couple months into the job at NOAA as the acting administrator. And we were chatting because at the time he was the chancellor of University of Texas, and he had a Marine Science Institute on the coast near Galveston, or really Port Aransas, that got damaged in Hurricane Harvey. And so he wanted to meet with me to talk about how NOAA could maybe support some of the rebuilding of that, which we did. But we were chatting, and at the end of it, he said, Tim, I always wanted to do what your people do. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, like all your fisheries biologists, I wanted to scuba dive and count fish.
Right.
And I said, you're kidding. Tell me about this. And he goes, yep, whenever since I was young, I was just enthralled with the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau. And that's what he wanted to do. So, what happened is he went to UT and he majored in biology. As you know, this is your story. And he said, I struggled. And the only way he could pass was he changed his major to journalism, like you.
That's so fun.
But then what happened is he was actually dejected. He wasn't sure what he was going to do in life. And he walked by a Navy recruiting office in Texas, and he saw an ad for Navy SEALs, and they were all kitted up in scuba gear. And he thought, maybe that's it. And of course, I think it worked out, obviously.
Yeah, certainly.
And so there you go. There's ways to combine what you love with something different, and there you go. You're on the right path.
Yeah, it's good to know that there's always, as proven by how I've been. Dad, thanks so much for being here with me today and chatting with me about everything. I know you're always super busy, and I live in Florida, so I'm glad we were able to find a way to make this happen. It was super fun, and I hope to have you back again on the podcast sometime. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. Be sure to tune in for more episodes and check out newwavemedia.com for more information and more content like this.
Thanks, Laurel.
Yay, thanks. I think that's good.
This episode of View from the Helm, Profiles in Leadership in the Maritime and Subsea Sectors, was brought to you by New Wave Media, B2B publishers to the maritime, subsea, offshore energy, ports, and logistics sectors. If you are interested in being a guest or a sponsor of View from the Helm, email Greg Troutwine at troutwine@marinelink.com or visit newwavemedia.com.